A deadly tank is operated in the Second World War battlefield, and it manages to take down more than 1,000 Nazi soldiers single-handedly. Without it, many say the war could have gone the other way. The movie opens with a Nazi soldier on horseback inspecting the aftermath of a battle. Suddenly he is attacked by Don Collier, also known as Wardaddy. After stabbing the soldier, Wardaddy releases the horse and makes his way into a tank called Fury. Inside the tank, one of his crew members, Grady Travis, nicknamed Coonass, is busy repairing it. The two men argue and blame each other for the recent death of another crew member. Once the tank is fixed, they leave the battle zone. When they arrive at their camp, Don Collier is met by other soldiers and Sergeant Binkowski, who are surprised to see him back as they weren't expecting him. After their brief conversation, another lieutenant approaches Collier and inquires about the rest of the 3rd Platoon. Collier somberly informs him that they are the only ones who managed to return. Meanwhile, the crew of the tank remove the body of their deceased member, Red, who was the assistant driver and bow gunner. His death deeply affects the crew. Collier tries to maintain a tough exterior as he instructs his team to refuel the tank and restock the supplies. Afterward, he retreats to a quiet spot where he finally allows himself to break down. Later, Collier is approached by Norman Ellison, who introduces himself as the new crew member replacing their deceased teammate, Red. Collier is unhappy about the new addition because Norman has only been in the Army for 8 weeks and lacks proper training. Despite his reservations, Collier shows Norman around the tank, and Norman meets the rest of the crew. The team is not thrilled to have him, especially when Norman reveals he was previously a clerk typist and has never been inside a tank. Grady then instructs Norman to clean his seat with a bucket of hot water and take a look at his new position. Norman, following orders, goes inside the tank with a bucket of hot water to clean. As he scrubs away the bloodstains, he discovers a piece of Red's face and becomes disgusted. Unable to handle it, he exits the tank and vomits. Meanwhile, Collier is discussing their situation with other soldiers when an SS soldier prisoner is brought into the camp for questioning by the commander. Collier, frustrated, tries to take out his anger on the prisoner, but is stopped by his team. He then hands a gun to Norman and tells him to be ready to use it if he encounters another SS soldier. Norman admits he has never killed anyone before, so Collier orders his team to train him in handling the gun. Following this, Norman then updates the team on their plan, letting them know that Collier will be leading them. He also informs them that their new orders are to join Baker Company and then take control of a small town. As the tank moves through a dense forest, Collier warns his crew to shoot at anything that moves, as German soldiers might be hiding and preparing to attack. Norman spots movement in the bushes but hesitates to shoot. At the last moment, Grady shouts a warning, just as the enemy launches their attack, leading to a successful ambush. A tank in front of them explodes, and Norman watches in horror as a soldier burns and shoots himself to death. Collier exits his tank and starts shooting at the enemy, who turn out to be just kids. He then scolds Norman for not firing and tells him that the soldier's death is his fault. After losing their lead tank, Collier takes charge and continues with their plan. Upon arriving at their destination, a soldier escorts Collier to Captain Wagner. Captain Wagner is displeased because he did not receive the 10 tanks he had requested. However, he briefs Collier on the mission, which involves rescuing his trapped soldiers and recovering their equipment from enemy territory. Collier then relays the plan to his team, emphasizing the need to be cautious with their weapons and to stay alert. Collier takes command of the 4 tanks he brought and guides them toward their designated area, moving through expansive fields. As they progress, German soldiers monitor their movement, setting up for an imminent attack. At the same time, US soldiers take cover to shield themselves from the enemy's fire. Collier skillfully navigates the tanks toward the German forces, while also coordinating the rescue of the soldiers trapped behind enemy lines. When the tanks reach the location of the stranded US troops, the rescued soldiers regroup with the tank crew, joining forces with their saviors. As Collier orders the tanks to advance closer to the German positions, the enemy begins firing at his platoon. They intensify their attack using powerful anti-tank weapons, leading to a fierce gunfight between the 2 platoons. Gordo, the driver and gunner of the Fury tank, instructs Norman to start shooting at the German soldiers. Lacking experience, Norman fires randomly into the air. When his ammunition runs out, a German soldier targets him. As Norman struggles to reload his weapon, the enemy soldier prepares to shoot at the tank. Fortunately, Bible, the gunner of the Fury tank, takes timely action and shoots the German soldier, saving Norman and preventing further damage to their tank. Gradually, Collier's platoon gains control of the area. Gordo then chastises Norman and instructs him to shoot the enemy soldiers lying dead on the ground. Norman hesitates, believing they are already dead. But Gordo insists he must double-tap them to ensure they are truly neutralized. Overwhelmed, Norman breaks down and expresses his desire to stop fighting. Collier reprimands him while Gordo tries to console him, explaining that this is just a harsh reality of war. Eventually, the platoon manages to defeat the remaining German soldiers and secure the area. Collier approaches Norman and makes a harsh remark, recalling how he once had an excellent bow gunner in Norman's position, and how Norman is now obstructing his efforts to save his crew. Norman apologizes, explaining that he is not trained to shoot at others. Meanwhile, the other soldiers discover a German soldier wearing a looted American trench coat. Seeing an opportunity to train Norman, Collier calls him out of the tank and orders him to shoot the enemy. The German soldier, pleading for his life, shows them a photo of his family and begs for mercy. Collier forces the soldier to kneel and demands that Norman use a pistol to kill him. Norman refuses, so Collier strikes him several times, insisting that he must shoot the soldier. Despite the intense pressure, Norman remains reluctant and suggests that he is ready to be killed instead of the soldier. Collier then forces the pistol into Norman's hand, compelling him to shoot. After the ordeal, Norman is left deeply traumatized. After a while, Bible helps Norman up, and they return to the group. Bible, Grady, and Gordo explain to Norman that while Collier can be tough, he is crucial to the strength and unity of their team. They reminisce about how their group came together after being shot down in North Africa. At that moment, Collier arrives and shows a supportive gesture towards Norman. Later, as they make their way to the nearby town, they come across bodies hanging with signs attached. These signs indicate that the deceased were Germans who had refused to fight in the war. Upon reaching the town, they begin searching for hiding German soldiers. They stop an old man to ask him where the soldiers are, but he is immediately shot after he points them out. A gunfight erupts, and they discover numerous German soldiers hiding in various buildings. They eliminate these soldiers, including using white phosphorus in one building, causing enemy soldiers to emerge in agony. During this engagement, Norman starts shooting at the enemy, which leads Collier to acknowledge and praise his efforts. Eventually, the team successfully captures the town. As they continue through the town, a man with a white flag emerges from a building and informs the soldiers that the remaining Germans want to surrender, signaling that they are ready to give up and that the war is over. Collier instructs his men to come out with their hands raised, while also warning his team to stay alert in case of a trap. A group of women and children emerges from the building, followed by an adult dressed in a soldier's uniform. Upon seeing him, Collier asks the man with the flag if he is the one responsible for hanging the children by the roadside. When the man confirms that he is indeed the one, Collier immediately orders his team to shoot him. As the US soldiers celebrate their victory in the town, some flirt with the German women, others scavenge items from the houses, and many take the chance to rest and relax. Meanwhile, Norman sits reading a book. Collier approaches him and praises him for his role in killing the enemy. Collier then takes Norman to an office building filled with dead bodies. He discusses the harsh realities of war, noting that while ideals are peaceful, history is marked by violence. Collier describes the scene in the office where officials, aware that the US soldiers were approaching, resorted to shooting each other. As they step outside, Collier tells Norman that if he follows orders and stays focused, he will be able to navigate these challenges successfully. While talking, Collier notices a woman peeking out from a window in one of the buildings. He takes Norman with him and they proceed to search the house. Collier first questions the woman, asking if she is hiding anyone, but she denies it. Not convinced by her response, Collier and Norman begin searching the apartment thoroughly. After some time, they discover a young girl hiding under the bed. Collier instructs Norman to close and lock the door behind them. The girl, trembling with fear, apologizes for lying, explaining that she was scared. She introduces the other girl, Emma, as her cousin. Seeing their fear, Collier decides to stay in the apartment for a while. The two girls are visibly terrified. After a bit of time, Collier asks Irma, one of the girls, to bring him some hot water. He also hands the other girl a few chicken eggs and instructs her to cook them. Additionally, Collier gives them 2 packets of cigarettes. As Collier prepares to shave, he removes his t-shirt, revealing scars on his back that tell the story of severe wounds he sustained during the war. Meanwhile, the girls are busy preparing a meal in the kitchen. Norman moves over to the piano and begins to play. His music surprises everyone in the room, capturing their attention. A short while later, Emma joins him, adding her voice to the piano's melody with a song. The combination of Norman's piano playing and Emma's singing creates a soothing and unexpected moment of calm, providing a brief respite from the tension of the situation. Collier then asks to have a private conversation with Emma in a separate room, and the two head to the bedroom. Irma tries to stop them, but Collier intervenes, saying they should be allowed to enjoy themselves since they are young. Before things become intimate, Norman takes a moment to read Emma's palm lines. After a while, they rejoin Collier and Irma to share the meal. Just as Irma is about to serve the food, Bible, Grady, and Gordo burst into the apartment. They inform Collier and Norman that they have arranged for Norman to meet a girl who is waiting downstairs. When the crew members see Emma and Norman sitting together at the dining table, they quickly realize what has happened. The atmosphere shifts as they begin to tease and mock both Norman and Emma, making the situation uncomfortable for everyone involved. When Grady starts harassing Emma, Norman raises his voice, telling him not to touch her. Collier backs Norman up, which offends Grady, Bible, and Gordo, as they feel their masculinity is challenged by Norman's refusal to share Emma. This sparks a tense standoff among the crew, with Grady intensifying his bullying towards Norman. Despite the growing tension, Collier insists that everyone sit down and share the meal together. During the meal, Grady takes it a step further by licking Emma's food before serving it to her. In response, Collier swaps his meal with Emma's, trying to make a point. Gordo then complains about not being included in the meal preparation. The atmosphere becomes increasingly strained as the 3 men start recounting stories from their time fighting in France, including a particularly grim tale about killing a horse. Collier tries to quiet them, but his warnings go unheeded. The conversation only adds to the mounting tension, leading Collier to bang his fist on the table in frustration, startling both Emma and Irma. At that moment, a soldier enters the room looking for Collier and informs him that Captain Wagoner needs to see him. Meanwhile, Gordo, who has been behaving poorly, apologizes for his actions, explaining that he has had too much to drink. As the soldiers rise from the table to leave, Emma and Norman attempt to have a private conversation. However, Grady intervenes, pulling Norman away and escorting him out, preventing them from talking. Collier meets with Captain Wagoner, who gives him a critical new mission. Captain Wagoner orders Collier to secure and hold a key crossroad, because some of his men have reported German troops heading towards the U.S. supply base, which houses many medics and essential supplies. Captain Wagoner further explains that this mission is highly risky, since the reports they received were incomplete due to the chaos of being under fire. The exact number of enemy troops, vehicles, or their full strength remains unknown. He also stresses the importance of this task, as preventing the Germans from disrupting the supply chain is crucial to avoiding a significant loss for the U.S. Army. As the troops prepare to leave, a German shell strikes the town. Everyone scrambles for cover, including Norman, who soon realizes that Emma's house has been destroyed in the explosion. Overcome with urgency, he rushes towards the wreckage to find Emma. Grady, following behind, pulls Norman away from the debris, leading to a brief altercation between them. The sight of Emma's lifeless body leaves Norman deeply shaken and further traumatizes him. After taking a moment to compose himself, Norman joins the rest of the squad as they move on to their next mission. As the platoon sets out, Norman remains deeply affected by Emma's death. Collier, noticing Norman's distress, speaks to him about his own experiences in past battles with Germany. He assures Norman that the war will eventually come to an end, though he grimly notes that many more lives will be lost before that happens. On their way to the crossroad, the platoon is suddenly ambushed by a powerful German Tiger tank that had been lying in wait. The Tiger tank strikes swiftly, destroying one of their tanks before the crew even realizes what is happening. Collier's platoon struggles to counter the powerful German tank. Tragically, the Tiger tank rapidly takes out all the other tanks in the platoon, leaving only the Fury intact. Sergeant Binkowski's tank and its crew are burned alive, while Sergeant Davis is shot in the head by the Tiger tank's fire. Collier attempts to devise a strategy to defeat the Tiger tank by attacking from behind. However, the Fury's own weapons are insufficient compared to the might of the Tiger tank. Despite these challenges, after several intense exchanges of fire, Collier's team finally manages to destroy the Tiger tank and kill the soldiers operating it. Collier attempts to contact their base, but the radio has been damaged during the fight with the Tiger tank. With their communication cut off, they decide to continue advancing, despite being the only ones left. As they near their destination, the Fury hits a landmine, which damages the tank's track chains. Bible and Gordo take on the task of repairing the Fury, while Grady and Norman are sent to investigate a nearby farmhouse for any enemy presence. Upon reaching the farmhouse, they discover it is an aid station, but it is filled only with dead soldiers. Inside, Grady makes an unexpected apology to Norman. He admits that despite his earlier harsh behavior, he now sees Norman as a good person, though he himself feels he is not. After their conversation, Grady and Norman return to inform Collier about the farmhouse and its grim contents. Collier assigns Norman the task of climbing to the top of a nearby hill to keep watch over the area. Norman makes his way to the hilltop, finding a spot among the trees where he sets up with his canteen. While he is stationed there, he hears the distinct sound of a Nazi marching song. Peeking out from his hiding spot, he sees a large convoy of hundreds of German soldiers and trucks moving through the woods. Panicked, Norman rushes back to his team to relay the urgent news. Upon hearing Norman's report, Bible, Grady, and Gordo quickly devise a plan to find a secure hiding spot and allow the SS battalion to pass without detection, recognizing that they are vastly outnumbered. However, Collier is determined to stay and fight. He insists that his team seek safety and escape, but he refuses to abandon the Fury, which he regards as his home and where he feels he belongs. Upon hearing Collier's decision, Norman chooses to stay and fight alongside him, and the rest of the team follow suit. They begin their plan by collecting dead soldiers from the farmhouse and setting them on fire, creating the illusion that the Fury is destroyed. They carefully restock their ammunition and grenades, preparing for the impending battle. Once ready, they take a moment to sit together and share a drink, reflecting on the possibility that this might be their last opportunity to do so. Bible shares a verse that has been on his mind, and Collier recites the chapter from the book. They then give Norman his war name, Machine, as they brace themselves for the fight ahead. Norman soon spots the enemy advancing toward their position. They maintain silence until an enemy opens the hatch. At that moment, a fierce battle erupts with machine guns, cannons, and grenades. Despite their efforts to take down numerous enemies, Norman runs out of ammunition. Collier decides to use smoke grenades to cover their retreat and to retrieve more ammo. As they are about to safely return, one of the soldiers strikes Collier. Another enemy climbs onto the tank, but Collier manages to drag him down and slashes his throat with a knife. As the battle rages on and their ammunition runs out, the situation becomes dire. Grady is killed by a Panzerfaust shot that penetrates the turret. Gordo attempts to unpin a grenade, and it falls back into the tank. He sacrifices himself by shielding the grenade with his body as it explodes. Bible is taken out by a sniper shot. Collier, wounded, retreats into the tank. Surrounded and out of ammunition, Norman considers surrendering. However, Collier tells him to escape through the floor hatch as Germans start dropping grenades into the tank. Norman manages to slip out just in time and hides beneath the tank. As Norman hides, a young SS soldier spots him, but chooses not to alert his battalion and moves on. Norman remains concealed while the remaining German soldiers move away. The following morning, U.S. Army medics discover Norman and tell him that his tank crew's actions were nothing short of heroic. As he is being evacuated to safety, Norman casts a final glance at the battlefield, where the wreckage of the Fury lies amidst the corpses of countless German SS soldiers.